Sarah Chen's footsteps echoed through the pristine white halls of the Galactic Council station. Her heart was beating fast, but she kept her face calm. As Earth's first ambassador to the Council, she couldn't show weakness. Not today. Not when humanity's reputation was at stake. The station itself was a marvel of engineering. A massive ring-shaped structure floating at the edge of the Andromeda Galaxy. Creatures of all shapes and sizes moved through its corridors. Some floated like ghostly clouds of light, while others stomped around on multiple legs. Sarah tried not to stare, but it was hard not to feel small among them. As she approached the council chambers, a tall crystalline being blocked her path. Light danced through its transparent body, forming patterns that somehow looked disapproving. "Ah, the human representative," it said, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "I am First Speaker Zix of the Zoraxian Collective. I trust you found your way here without too much difficulty. Your species' neural pathways are still so primitive." Sarah forced a polite smile. "We managed just fine, First Speaker. Turns out having a brain that runs on biochemistry instead of crystal matrices works well enough." The Zoraxians' light patterns flickered in what Sarah had learned was their version of laughter. How charmingly defensive. "Come, the council awaits. Try not to fall asleep during the proceedings. We understand your species requires frequent periods of unconsciousness to function." Sarah bit back a sharp reply and followed the Zoraxian into the chamber. The room was enormous, with hundreds of floating platforms arranged in circles. Each platform held representatives from different alien species. Some were mechanical, others organic, and a few seemed to be made of pure energy. As Sarah took her assigned place, the lowest platform, naturally, murmurs and translated chuckles filled the air. A group of serpentine aliens coiled around each other, making no effort to hide their amusement as they pointed at her with their tails. "Observe," one of them hissed loudly enough for everyone to hear. "It even needs to breathe manually." More laughter followed. Sarah stood straight, remembering her diplomatic training. She had expected this. Humanity was the new kid on the block after all. They had only achieved faster than light travel 50 years ago, while some of these species had been crossing galaxies for millennia. The council session began with various species presenting their technological achievements. The Zoraxians showed off their new quantum fold drive. The Mechnoids demonstrated an artificial star they had built. When it was Earth's turn, Sarah's presentation on recent advances in fusion technology was met with the kind of patience usually reserved for a child's crayon drawing. During a break in the proceedings, Sarah wandered into the council's museum wing, hoping to find a moment of peace. The displays showed artifacts from what the council called ancient civilizations, species so advanced they had seemingly vanished from the galaxy millions of years ago. She stopped in front of a strange device, its purpose unknown, but its design oddly familiar. The plaque called it function unknown, possibly ceremonial, but something about its curve and structure tugged at her memory. A Mechnoid curator rolled up beside her. "Fascinating, isn't it? We've never decoded its purpose. Some theorize it's a primitive attempt at neural interface technology." Sarah leaned closer. The device's pattern. It was almost exactly like the diagrams of human synaptic connections she'd seen in medical books. But that was impossible. These artifacts were millions of years old. Unless. The thought that formed in her mind was so explosive that she almost took a step back. She needed to make some calls back to Earth. Right now. Maybe humanity wasn't as primitive as everyone thought. Maybe they were something else entirely. Dr. James Martinez wiped the red Martian dust from his visor and stared at the strange object his team had just uncovered. The dig site, located in a deep crater near Olympus Mons, had already yielded several unusual findings. But this was different. Dr. Martinez shouted his assistant, Emily Wong, her voice crackling through the radio. "You need to see these readings. They don't make any sense." James carefully made his way across the excavation site, his magnetic boots keeping him anchored in Mars' low gravity. Other scientists in their white spacesuits moved around like slow-motion ghosts against the rust-colored landscape. The object they had found was about the size of a basketball, but it wasn't made of any material they recognized. It had a metallic shine, but it felt warm to the touch even in the freezing Martian atmosphere. Strange patterns covered its surface, patterns that looked eerily similar to the way human brain cells connected with each other. "How old is it?" James asked, already dreading the answer. Emily checked her tablet. "According to our initial scans, 5 million years old." James felt his mouth go dry. That's impossible. Humans weren't even close to existing back then. Their conversation was interrupted by a familiar sound, the low hum of an alien ship entering Mars' atmosphere. The Zoraxian diplomatic vessel landed nearby, its crystalline surface reflecting the dim sunlight. "Wonderful," James muttered. "The galactic babysitters are here." First Speaker Zix emerged from the ship, its crystalline form hovering above the ground. 2 other Zoraxians followed, their bodies pulsing with what seemed like amusement. "We receive reports of your discovery," Zix said, its tone dripping with condescension. "No doubt another piece of primitive technology your ancestors tried to reverse engineer from superior civilizations." James held up the sphere. "Then maybe you can tell us what it is." The Zoraxian's light patterns flickered as it scanned the object. For the first time since James had met these aliens, he saw something new in their reaction: confusion. "This is clearly a defective artifact," Zix said quickly. "Its design makes no logical sense. The patterns are chaotic, like your own primitive neural systems." But James wasn't listening anymore. His tablet had just lit up with an urgent message from Earth. Similar objects had been found on Venus, buried deep under its toxic atmosphere. And more were being discovered on Europa, frozen in its icy crust. All of them had the same age, 5 million years old. All of them had patterns that matched human neural structures. Even more strange, the objects seemed to react to human presence. When James held the sphere, its surface grew warmer, and the patterns began to glow faintly. But when the Zoraxians tried to examine it, it remained cold and dark. "We'll need to confiscate these artifacts," Zix announced. "They could be dangerous to primitive species such as yourselves." James carefully placed the sphere in a secure container. "I'm afraid that's not possible, First Speaker. These were found on human territory. They fall under Earth jurisdiction." The Zoraxian's light patterns turned sharp and angry. "You dare tow?" A sudden beep from Emily's equipment cut off the alien's protest. "Dr. Martinez," she called out, her voice shaking with excitement. "The sphere, it's sending out a signal. And you won't believe where it's pointing to." James looked at his own readings and felt his heart skip a beat. The signal wasn't pointing to some distant alien civilization. It was pointing directly to Earth. The Zoraxians had stopped talking. For the first time since humans had met them, the advanced aliens seemed genuinely worried. Maybe they had good reason to be. Dr. Lisa Chang hadn't slept in 2 days. The genetics lab at the Global Research Center was buzzing with activity even at 3 a.m. Scientists rushed back and forth, checking and double-checking their findings, because what they had discovered was impossible, or at least, it should have been. "Run it again," Lisa told her team, staring at the holographic display of human DNA spinning slowly in the air before her. "Something has to be wrong." But nothing was wrong. The results were the same every time. Hidden within the so-called junk DNA, the parts of human genetic code that scientists had thought served no purpose, they had found something extraordinary. Patterns. Complex, organized patterns that looked more like computer code than natural genetic material. "Dr. Chung," called out her colleague, Dr. Ahmed Rahman. "The alien delegation is here." Lisa looked up to see 3 Zoraxian representatives floating into the lab, their crystalline bodies casting rainbow patterns on the white walls. Behind them came Ambassador Sarah Chen, looking tired but determined. "Show us these," Findings you claim to have made, the lead Zoraxian demanded. Lisa pressed a few buttons on her console. The DNA model expanded, showing the encoded sections they had discovered. We found this while studying the signals from the Mars artifacts. It's not random. It's not natural. Someone put this information in our DNA millions of years ago. The Zoraxians' light patterns flickered rapidly, their version of whispering to each other. Impossible, one said. Humans are a young species. Primitive. Your kind barely managed space travel a few decades ago. That's what we thought too, Lisa said. She pulled up another display. But look at this. We analyzed genetic samples from every alien species in the Galactic Council database. Every single one of them shows signs of artificial engineering. And every single one is younger than humanity. The room went silent. Even the Zoraxians stopped flickering. What exactly are you suggesting? Ambassador Chen asked quietly. Lisa took a deep breath. The information encoded in our DNA. It's not just random data. It's technology. Incredibly advanced technology. We're just beginning to decode it, but what we found so far, it makes the most advanced alien tech look like children's toys. She brought up another display, showing a timeline. Based on our analysis, human DNA was deliberately modified around 5 million years ago, the same time as those artifacts were buried on Mars, Venus, and Europa. But here's the really interesting part. The modification didn't add anything new to our DNA. It locked away things that were already there. The lead Zoraxian moved closer to the display, its crystalline form vibrating with what might have been concern. This is clearly a mistake. Our species achieved space flight millions of years before humans evolved from. Did you? Dr. Raman interrupted. He pressed a button, and new data filled the screens. We've been analyzing the basic operating principles of your technology. The quantum fold drive, your crystalline computing. They all follow patterns we're finding in our own DNA. They're simplified versions of human designs. Zoraxian's light patterns turn dark. You dare to suggest. A sudden beeping from Lisa's console interrupted them. One of the encoded DNA sequences had just been partially decoded. Text appeared on the screen. Text written in perfect, modern English. To our descendants, Lisa read aloud, her voice shaking. If you're reading this, the time has finally come. We're sorry we had to leave you this way, but we had no choice. The universe is more dangerous than you know. The message ended there, but it was enough. The Zoraxians were completely still now, their usual flickering patterns frozen in what looked like shock. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, her face showing a mix of awe and concern. I think, she said slowly, it's time for humanity to have a very different kind of conversation with the Galactic Council. The truth was becoming clear. Humanity wasn't the new kid on the block. They were the elders who had forgotten their own history. Dr. Michael Santos sat in the sleep lab, watching 20 volunteers dream. Their brain activity played across multiple screens, creating patterns he had seen thousands of times before. But now, after the DNA discovery, these patterns meant something completely different. Look at this, he said to Ambassador Chen, who had come to observe. We always wondered why humans needed so much sleep. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy only needs short rest periods. But we need hours of dream time every single day. On the main screen, one of the volunteers, a teenager named Alex, showed intense brain activity. The neural patterns matched exactly with the code they had found in human DNA. They're not just dreaming, Sarah said, leaning closer to the screen. They're downloading. Michael nodded. Every night, when we dream, our brains are actually accessing that ancient database stored in our DNA. We just never realized it before. We thought dreams were random, but they're not. They're fragments of our ancestors' memories. A Zoraxian observer floated nearby, its crystalline body dimmer than usual. The aliens had stopped mocking humans since the DNA discovery. Now they just watched and worried. Suddenly, Alex sat up in his sleep pod, his eyes still closed. "The stars," he said clearly, despite being completely asleep. "We had to hide them, had to make them forget." The darkness between was growing. The monitors went crazy. Alex's brain patterns now perfectly matched the encoded patterns they had found in human DNA. "Quick," Michael said to his assistant. "Record everything." Alex kept speaking, his voice different somehow. Older, wiser. "The ships, vast ships, bigger than worlds. We built them, sailed them through the gaps between galaxies. But then we saw it coming. The void that devours light. The Zoraxian moved closer, its lights pulsing rapidly. Impossible. The level of technology he's describing. It's beyond anything. Beyond anything you know," Sarah finished quietly. "But not beyond what we once knew." On other pods, more dreamers began to speak. Each one described fragments of an ancient human civilization, one that had mastered technologies the current Galactic Council couldn't even imagine. "The Matrix gates," one woman mumbled in her sleep. "Networks of stars, linked together. We could step from one galaxy to another." "The thought engines," an old man whispered. "Cities that lived and breathed with us, built from pure consciousness." Michael's computers were barely keeping up with the flood of information. "This is why the Zoraxian technology felt so familiar to us," he said. "Their quantum fold drive. It's a primitive copy of these matrix gates our ancestors built. Even their crystalline computing is just a simple version of our old thought engines." The Zoraxians' light patterns showed clear distress now. "Then why did you forget? Why would such an advanced civilization choose to become primitive?" Alex provided the answer, his dream voice filling with sadness. "We had no choice. The void was coming. We couldn't stop it, not even with all our power. So we had to hide, had to go back to the beginning, had to seed the galaxy with new life and wait." "Wait for what?" Sarah asked softly. "Wait for the right time," Alex said. "Wait until we were ready to remember. Wait until we were wise enough not to repeat our mistakes." His voice faded, and he lay back down, returning to normal sleep. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitors. Michael looked at his screens, then at Sarah and the Zoraxian. "Well," he said, "I guess we know why humans dream now. The real question is, what do we do with everything we're remembering?" The Zoraxian's response was quick and worried. The better question might be, what was so terrible that it made the most powerful civilization in history choose to forget itself? Sarah stared at the sleeping volunteers, each one slowly unlocking pieces of humanity's lost past. "I think," she said, "we're about to find out." The Galactic Council chamber was silent for the first time in its history. No whispers, no movement, no flickering lights from the Zoraxians. Every alien species watched as Dr. Lisa Chang and Ambassador Sarah Chen presented humanity's findings. 5 million years ago, Lisa said, her voice echoing in the quiet chamber, humanity wasn't primitive. We were gods. The holographic display showed images collected from thousands of human dreams, vast ships that could swallow suns, cities that floated between galaxies, and machines that could reshape reality itself. But more importantly, Sarah added, we were teachers. She gestured to the assembled aliens. Look at your own histories. Every single species in this council was engineered, not by random chance, but by design. Our design. A serpentine alien raised its head. You expect us to believe that humans created us. Not created, Lisa corrected. Guided. Look at your own DNA. The patterns are there. Subtle changes made millions of years ago to help your species develop intelligence. We didn't make you. We just helped you grow. The evidence was undeniable. As more humans accessed their ancestral memories through dreams, the full picture had emerged. Humanity had once been a Type IA civilization, capable of engineering entire galaxies. They had seeded the cosmos with life, gently guiding the evolution of countless species. But then something had gone wrong. Alex, the young dreamer who had first accessed the clearest memories, stepped forward. In the past week, he had become a bridge between past and present. They came from between the galaxies, he said, his voice carrying ancient memories. The Void Ones. They consumed light, life, and even time itself. The chamber's lights dimmed automatically, as if responding to the darkness in his words. Our ancestors fought them, Sarah continued. With all their godlike power, they fought. But the Void Ones couldn't be destroyed. They could only be delayed. Dr. Chang brought up new images, mathematical equations that made even the most advanced alien scientists gasp. Our ancestors made a choice. They knew they couldn't win, not then. So they planned for the future instead. They hid their knowledge in our DNA, Alex said. Made themselves forget. Made us start over from the beginning. Because they knew the Void Ones would return one day, and when they did, Sarah finished, humanity needed to be ready. Not just with power, but with wisdom. We needed to grow up again, to learn from our own struggles, to understand what it means to be weak before we could handle being strong. The Zoraxian first speaker floated forward, its crystalline form subdued. And the artifacts on Mars, Venus, and Europa. Alarm clocks, Lisa said simply, set to wake us up when the time was right. When the Void Ones were approaching again, the chamber erupted in panic. Aliens of all species began talking at once. Some demanded proof. Others wanted to know how much time was left. A few were already bowing to the humans, treating them like the gods they once were. Sarah raised her hands for silence. We're not your gods, she said firmly. We're not your masters. We're your older siblings, and we need your help. The knowledge is coming back to us now, but we don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to save it. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and sensory organs of every species present. Our ancestors made one mistake. They tried to fight the Void Ones alone. We won't repeat that mistake. Alex nodded, ancient wisdom shining in his young eyes. The Void Ones are coming. But this time, we'll face them together, as equals. The chamber was quiet again, but this time it wasn't silence of shock. It was the silence of understanding. The time had come for humanity to remember who they were. Not to rule, but to protect. The real test was about to begin. The room that once served as Earth's humble embassy had become the center of the Galactic Council station. Aliens of all species crowded outside, hoping for a chance to meet with the representatives of humanity. Their newly discovered elder race. Ambassador Sarah Chen watched through the window as a group of Zoraxians bowed deeply to a human maintenance worker who looked very uncomfortable with the attention. This has to stop, Sarah said, turning to face the others in the room. Dr. Lisa Chong, Dr. Michael Santos, and young Alex sat around a table that floated in midair, a gift from an alien race desperate to please their ancestors. They're afraid of us now, Michael said, rubbing his tired eyes. Can you blame them? Every day, we remember more of our past power, the things we could do. He shuddered. It's terrifying. Alex, who had become the clearest channel to humanity's ancient memories, nodded. Yesterday, I remembered how to build stars, he said quietly. Not just fusion reactors. Actual stars. A commotion outside drew their attention. Two alien species, the serpentine Naga and the crystalline Zoraxians, were arguing. Both claimed to have been humanity's favorite creation, though humans had never claimed to favor any species. This is exactly what our ancestors feared, Lisa said, checking data on her tablet. According to the genetic memories we've decoded, this kind of worship and fear is why they chose to forget. Power without wisdom leads to disaster. Sarah stood up and walked to the window. Then we need to show them a different way. She pressed a button, and the window became transparent from both sides. The arguing aliens fell silent, staring at the humans within. Listen to me, Sarah said, her voice carrying through the station's communication system. We are not your gods. We are not your masters. The humans you knew as bumbling primitives, and the humans you now fear as all-powerful ancients. Neither image is correct. The aliens watched, transfixed, as she continued. Yes, we were powerful once. Yes, we helped guide your evolution. But do you know why we chose to forget? Because we realized that true civilization isn't about power. It's about wisdom. It's about learning to work together. Alex stepped forward, ancient memories flowing through his words. Our ancestors didn't make you in their image. They gave each species unique gifts, unique perspectives, because they knew that diversity would be our greatest strength against the Void Ones. Dr. Chang pulled up a holographic display showing the approaching darkness between galaxies. The threat is real, but we won't face it as masters and servants. We'll face it as equals. But your power, a Zoraxian began, will mean nothing if we don't learn from our past. Michael interrupted. We need your help. All of you. Your different ways of thinking, your unique technologies, your particular strengths. That's why our ancestors guided your evolution, not to rule you, but to create allies. Sarah looked at each alien face she could see. The Void Ones are coming. But this time, we won't fight them as gods. We'll fight them as a family. Every species contributing, every voice heard. The aliens outside began to murmur, but it was different now. The fear was fading, replaced by something else. Hope. So please, Sarah finished, stop bowing to us. Stand with us instead. We have a lot of work to do, and not much time to do it. As the aliens began to discuss among themselves, Sarah turned back to her team. Do you think they understood? Alex smiled, ancient wisdom shining in his young eyes. They will. After all, that's why our ancestors chose them in the first place. Outside, the arguments had stopped. Instead, aliens of different species were talking to each other, sharing ideas, making plans. The first step towards saving the galaxy wasn't remembering humanity's power. It was learning how to use it wisely. The combined fleet of 10,000 ships hung in space between galaxies. Every vessel was different. Crystalline Zoraxian ships floated next to serpentine Naga cruisers, while energy-based Lumini vessels pulsed with rainbow colors. At the center of the fleet hung the Earth ship Unity, its design a perfect blend of ancient knowledge and modern innovation. On Unity's bridge, Ambassador Sarah Chen looked at the tactical display. The void was approaching, a darkness deeper than space itself, consuming everything in its path. All species reporting ready, Dr. Michael Santos announced from his station. Next to him, Dr. Lisa Chang monitored the complex web of technologies they had created together, each race contributing their unique strengths. Young Alex stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes glowing slightly as he accessed humanity's ancient memories. This is different from last time, he said. Our ancestors faced them alone. But now we have family, Sarah finished, looking at the alien representatives on her bridge. The Zoraxian first speaker, once so condescending, now stood as an equal partner. The Naga chief, the Lumini elder, and dozens of other species leaders worked together at their stations. The ship's sensors beeped a warning. The void was close now. Remember the plan, Sarah broadcast to the fleet. Humanity's ancient power combined with Zoraxian crystal tech, Naga plasma weapons, Lumini energy manipulation, and every other species' unique gifts. We're stronger together than we ever were apart. The void struck first. Tendrils of absolute darkness reached for the fleet, trying to consume them as they had consumed so many galaxies before. But this time was different. Zoraxian ships formed a crystalline network, their matrices amplified by human knowledge. Naga vessels wove through the formation, their plasma weapons guided by Lumini energy patterns. Every species played their part in a dance that had taken months to perfect. Now, Sarah ordered. Alex raised his hands, channeling humanity's ancient power through the combined fleet. Every ship glowed with energy, as old as the stars themselves, enhanced by the unique technologies of 100 alien races. The void recoiled for the first time in its existence. "It's working," Lisa shouted, checking her readings. "The combined energy matrix is pushing it back." Michael's hands flew over his console. "All species reporting successful synchronization. We're actually doing it." The void fought back, sending waves of darkness that threatened to overwhelm them. But where one species' defenses failed, another stepped in. When human power faltered, Zoraxian crystals took the strain. When Naga weapons overheated, Lumini energy cooled them. Sarah watched as the impossible happened. The void, the enemy that had forced humanity to hide its power for 5 million years, began to retreat. "Final phase," she ordered. "Everyone together." The entire fleet moved as one. Human knowledge, Zoraxian precision, Naga power, Lumini control, and the unique gifts of every other species combined into a single pulse of energy that lit up the space between galaxies. The void vanished. In the silence that followed, Sarah looked around her bridge. Humans and aliens alike stared in amazement at their victory, but more amazing was how they had achieved it. "You know," the Zoraxian first speaker said, its crystalline form glowing warmly, "we once thought humans were primitive because they needed help to do everything. Now we understand, knowing when to ask for help, knowing how to work together. That was the most advanced thing about you all along." Alex smiled, the ancient memories settling peacefully in his mind. Our ancestors knew this would happen. Not the battle. That was uncertain. But this moment. Different species, standing together as equals. That's why they guided our evolution. Not to create servants, but to create a family. Sarah looked out at the fleet, no longer separated by species, but united in victory. "So," she asked, "what shall we do now?" The Naga chief slithered forward. Now we explore the universe together. As equals. As family. As it was always meant to be," Alex added. And in the space where darkness had once ruled, a new light began to shine. The light of different species working together, each one unique, each one valued, each one part of something greater than themselves. The universe would never be the same. And that was exactly the point.